Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod with Joseph McGrail. With us, he is Creative Director and Founder at Champion Sales and Marketing. Going to talk sales, going to talk exit, startups, and everything in between. This podcast is brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcasts like this one. If you want to monetize your podcast, because a bunch of people start a pod yet abandon their podcast because they're not making any money, I can help you monetize them. So podfire.com for that. Joe, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and your business.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I run a small boutique sales and marketing agency, and my lane is young startups young companies that are entering the market, pre-seed, seed, Series A, various different stages of infancy. And I started my business in the beginning of 2019, because I realized throughout my tenure sitting across sales, marketing, operations in the last 20 years, I realized that the hardest skills across sales and marketing was identifying a company that you could help, turning that into a warm opportunity, and then generating a revenue stream from that. Right. And if you have the ability to do that in a predictable and in a measurable way, I think that skill set is paramount. And that's why I opened up my agency to offer the experience and the expertise that I have in terms of developing that core skill set to help companies get in front of their targeted audience, qualified prospects across their targeted audience.
Tell me about that first exit of yours. How did you contribute to it and how it changed your life?
Yeah, so I think in terms of my first experience in terms of the actual with Yodle, in terms of that exit to web.com for 340 million, I think in terms of the start, the focus was an outside sales operation. And I was one of the first inside sales people to join the sales team within Yodle. And then within a short time, they had offices in Atlanta, Philadelphia, New York. And in a short time, in terms of the revenue contribution, I was generating more revenue than many of the offices combined. And I think at that point, one of the things that I was extremely helpful with the organization is the concept to move from a outbound, pound the pavement out on the street reps to an inside sales operation, which is essentially what they became. I think the second part is that across your target addressable market, you want to have the people that are the most qualified, the people that are the most likely to convert at the fastest rate, right? So at this time, it was interesting in terms of people were still referring to the yellow pages. Google and the internet was in the beginning of 2000, mid 2000. It really wasn't the way the market is today in terms of people utilizing the internet for information. And it was, where do you start? So one of the things that I was really good at for Yodle was to give them the ability to focus on specific verticals and target roles that they saw that with the speed in which I was able to identify and close these, they were able to replicate in scale across their organization and take some of my creative ideas in terms of targeting to generate real results. And I think those are the two primary key contributors that I had for that in terms of my contribution to the exit. In terms of how it changed my life, I think it was a tremendous experience. It was just a great experience to meet great people. I have friends that I'm still friends with to this day, business partners that I still do business with to this day, and just being involved in the great leadership and part of the organization really just set me up for the place that I'm in today.
Right. And as a top account manager, a career in that field, I mean, you live in New York, so real estate is pretty expensive there, the rent, but is it fair to say that in average your salary was over 150K a year?
Yes.
So that's a great career, right? So what led you to leave that career to start your own firm?
So that's a great question. I saw that a lot of young companies were looking at salespeople through the wrong lenses as lead generators instead of closing business. And a lot of the young companies, like I mentioned, after Yodle, they were still in various different stages of infancy. And a lot of these companies, they had few to no customers, so they may have had product market fit, but they never had their messaging validated around the product market fit. And they were looking at me, the salesperson, as a lens of a lead generator. So I would go on and over a period of 4 or 5 different years with a few different small startup tech companies and go on to get, you know, the chief strategy officer for Ford Motor Group on the phone, right? And be able to really connect the buyers and sellers within the organization that I was working for. But there wasn't any substance there for a lot of these companies, because in the young startups, there's the can, aim, and claim in terms of the 3 aspirations in terms of what the company could do. And that was kind of the aha moment in terms of, okay, I have this specific skill set and expertise that I'm going to go ahead and leverage to not just one company, but all young startups and young companies, not only to help them effectively generate engagement across their targeted audience, but to develop, refine, optimize, and validate the messaging that works in terms of creating some predictability around the sales and marketing operation.
Product market fit. My way to learn more about product market fit first is this podcast as a broad research tool to get ideas from folks like you, what niche works with what potential product. Then I take these ideas and I execute them with my cold email machine at scale, right? I must send around 300K emails a month. So I exactly know, for example, that AI masterminds right now are trendy and people can make a crap ton of money with them. I also know that recruiting services, even in the AI niche, can have a harder time. Right now is not the right time for recruiting firms. What is your product market fit system? How do you make scientific conclusion of this works at this very time? And where is the moving target at this current moment in this market?
I mean, that's a great question. So I think that, well, there's 2 ingredients that I get that from, but I think in terms of I've created kind of this revenue strategy and operations where I think a lot of people in the market, they just skip the revenue strategy and they go right into the operations, into the tactics and executions, which I think is a lot of the times to the degree of why lead gen programs fail. So I think in terms of, I combine the revenue strategy with the operations. So I actually design and set up a marketing strategy, a content strategy, and the lead gen strategy, and I connect that to the lead gen tactics and execution. Where I think my program really surfaces the ingredients that companies need to, the metrics and the data that companies want to consume is the framework. So I've created ingredients and data points to really craft, refine, and validate and optimize the messaging. So those 4 data points, Charles, it's market intelligence data. So that's the first data point. And a lot of companies, they're very well rehearsed on their industry data in terms of the industry, the target role, and their targeted audience in terms of their problems and their pain points. But where there's a deficiency of what I see in terms of market intelligence data is the point of view of competitors, or similar companies calling into the same audience. There's a gap in that point of view of understanding where that market intelligence will help refine that value prop. The second is sales and marketing performance on a campaign level, right? So like on a distribution channel, if you're using LinkedIn, your invitation to acceptance rates could give you your insight on targeting. Your acceptance to engagement rates could give you insight on your messaging. So campaign's performance on the level, on the campaign level, that data, right? The third data point is the sales performance data. That's the data that we learn from the sales calls, from the meetings that we book, from our actual live conversations with prospects. What did we learn, right? And then the fourth and the final data point where we make all of our decisions from, because we're not leveraging opinions or assumptions, is customer data. We want to find if in fact we have the benefit of, we have companies that are using our product, whether it's on freemium or paid. We want to understand how and why they're using our product, so that we could take those 4 ingredients and develop, refine, and optimize and adapt, take that information and adapt to the market to win faster. And one other thing too that I'll just add to that I think may be important is that when you develop your point of view of the market, of the industry and the marketplace, your target roles, your audience, the buyers who you want to sell to, and then the competitive landscape, develop 10 questions, the most beneficial questions that are relevant to them, and then draw 1 to 3 insights from each question. That's the hard part. And that's the exercise that will allow companies to take that framework with those 4 ingredients, marry those 2 together, and in a much faster rate, be able to develop a true value proposition that's tied to business outcomes, that's beyond the hey, this is what my product does and these are my benefits and features, which is 99% of every co-founder and founder's explanation of the way that they articulate what their product does.
Who do you target on your side? And yeah, what's your ICP, and how do you generally get in front of these clients of yours?
Yeah, I mean, so that's great. So my target ICP is founders, co-founders of young startups that are entering the market, that are actively entering the market, or that are existing, a startup in the market. They have very few to no customers at all, and they're trying to figure it out. That's my target ICP. Whether it's bootstrapped or funded, I'll work with, as long as they have the ability to work with me, I'll work with them regardless of the structure of their business in terms of the way that they're working. In terms of verticals, I mean, it's B2B. It's big in SaaS, market research, IT, DevOps. A lot of products and solutions more on the complex technical side. And then in terms of how I get my business, Charles, I use referrals and my own network to grow my business, but I use my own system that I plug in for my clients. I use the same exact system for my own company to get in front of qualified prospects. So the solution that I use is Elvis Works, and that structure and process and framework that I've created, that I've tied together revenue strategy and operations with those 3 components, gives founders and co-founders an effective path for them to be able to benchmark and measure and optimize their activities to make sure that the act and motions of their sales and marketing efforts are generating an ROI.
Right, and the precise outreach, like what's your framework? Is it email? Is it calls? Is it LinkedIn? Like what's your secret
Yeah,
sauce?
the distribution channel is email and LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn. I don't use LinkedIn Campaign Manager. I'm using LinkedIn to build the profile to handle first connections with the targeted audience. So that's how I'm using LinkedIn. But the two distribution channels are email and LinkedIn. I do get beat up on that too a little bit too, Charles, in terms of, hey, Joe, email doesn't work or it hasn't worked, and I think that's the challenge in the market in terms of experience and expertise. Distribution channels has nothing to do with the success or lack of success. They're all about reach and cost. And at what rate does it convert at? So once you're able to validate your product market fit and your messaging together, the distribution channels become all about cost and reach. And then the engagement rate, the conversion ratio associated to each channel, right? So display, what's that average conversion ratio of 0.03%? Email 3%, right? So you can truly back in to the performance metrics, where I think a lot of these companies, they're looking at channels as the solution instead of the outlet to generate the actual engagement.
Interesting. And if I want to work with you or hire you, what are your fees?
It's monthly. There's no contract. So my clients work with me on performance and results. My program ranges from 3,500 to 5,000 per month. And that's up to 2,500 qualified prospects that would go through a highly sophisticated, validated, and verified process that would, through their own user behavior, we would be able to definitively say that they've expressed a specific degree of interest before I even passed it off to my client.
How much clients do you typically have in a roster on a monthly basis? 3, 5, 10?
5 to 7 clients is after once I get around that number, I'm at capacity, and anything outside of that 5 to 7 mark, dependent upon what the composition of those companies are, the types of companies they are, I'd be kind of taking away from my existing client base if I bring in more clients after that.
Right. And are you solo dolo? Do you hire folks to help you run the business?
I have a team in the Philippines that helps me do the day-to-day, the execution and the work that is redundant. But in terms of the deployment of the actual automated, I use a lot of automated tools and things like that in terms of the tech stack. So I do have a team that will help me with that. It is offshore, so it is, but in terms of the strategy and the business and the chorus, it is me.
Right. So what are your goals to finish off the year? Is it to reach $1 million this year? What are you focusing on, and what about the next?
Yeah, I mean, so I would love to be at capacity, Charles. I mean, I'm still accepting a few more clients. I have a few opportunities that are because at Q4, we're into Q4 of the year, so I'm highly confident that I'll be able to obtain those. I think my goal is to be at capacity before the end of the year, so I'm starting in January with a full client roster. And then I can continue to market the machine, so that way, in case there's any opening spots, I could just fill it seamlessly, right? So those are the two primary goals that I have in terms of for my business. And on the delivery side for my clients, one of the things too, Charles, because I am the type of structure for my organization and my business, I'm the roll up the sleeves types of guy. So I'm very customer focused. So I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm willing to do anything and everything I possibly can to make my clients successful.
What kind of challenges have you faced since you decided to become an entrepreneur, and how have you resolved these?
That's a great question. So I think that one of the biggest challenges is setting the expectations for the client in terms of the services that I provide, because I do offer a lead gen component, but it's not a pure lead gen program, right? So I do offer a custom database to allow companies to market it to the way buyers buy, right? If that's not a one call close and it's not a sale where they're just going to be purchasing on the first sales conversation. Companies need to have a database so they could intelligently connect and communicate with their audience. So I'm sharing that with you, Charles, because the biggest hurdle was overcoming that the education and the expectations in terms of positioning the way the market buys, and the reality and the pulse of the market, and connecting that to the thinking of the founder or the co-founder or the leader of the sales and marketing operation. It's one of the biggest challenges.
And how do you change a mindset that is rigid and someone that's not open-minded? You keep telling them about a reality, but theirs is just too different.
I mean, it's a great question. I think it comes down to measurement, right? So a lot of people will say, will tell me that it didn't work, and they tell me the reasons why they always will entertain a partnership or a relationship, but they can never really pinpoint specifically why it failed. And if we're unable to understand specifically why we fell short of certain initiatives, we're not going to be able to improve. So I think a lot of the times companies, they don't have a true framework to measure their performance and their activities. So a good example of that is time, cost, and speed divided by the efficiency rate or the outcome, right? So trade shows, if it takes a week to plan a trade show and the trade show is 2 days, right? Well, the time is 10 days. The cost, let's say it's 15 grand with the hotel, and you got 2 opportunities out of it, right? Well, there's other initiatives within a B2B briefcase that will allow them to work faster and more efficiently than when you apply that formula, time, cost, and speed, and the output. I could generate much more engagement and results in that same amount of time, speed, and cost. So they don't have the measurement apparatus to be able to truly measure the activities across their sales and marketing functions to prioritize them in a way that's going to drive the biggest impact for their business.
Love that. Joe, where can we find out more about you?
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I post on my company website. I mean, on my company LinkedIn handle 5 days a week for insights for any founders or co-founders or leaders of sales and marketing companies that want to have insights. It's my day-to-day experience that I post insights from that. I'm active on LinkedIn. They could feel free to email me at joe@championssalesandmarketing.com or sales@championssalesandmarketing.com. Or they could call me, call me direct.
Call me on my cell phone.
908-309-6394.
There you go. That was Joseph McGrail and Charles Cormier, your host at founderwisdompodcast.com.